So it's nice to see everybody. Thank you all so much as you're coming in. I think we're probably going to have some other people trailing in as we continue with the conversation. So as many of you have done, please feel free to put your name in the chat and the organization that you are representing today. And welcome. Both Yanira and I are excited to be here today and have this kind of informal chat with one another, and then, talk a little bit about ourselves, which I'm going to do now. I've been in fundraising for almost 30 years now. I started off at an arts nonprofit based in my hometown of San Antonio, Texas. It was called the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. And I was a grant writer. And over time have now taken on responsibilities around annual giving, individual donors, major gifts, principal gifts, capital campaigns, endowment campaigns, comprehensive campaigns, board work, just kind of the full gamut of development, and also now alumni relations. So I spent about the first 10, 11 years was working in the nonprofit field. And then the last couple of years since then has been in higher education. And I was at UT Austin for about almost 14 years. And then I've been at Trinity University now for about 4 years. And my role here is assistant vice president. And so I actually oversee our communications, our donor relations and special events, our major gifts and planned giving, annual giving, alumni relations, and then our advancement team, which is like all of the services that go in to support those teams. And I also am a researcher. So I have a PhD in higher education leadership and policy. And my research area is Latinx philanthropy. And so I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I'm working on a research project right now in partnership with the San Antonio Area Foundation to look at Latinx philanthropy here in Bexar County. And I say here because I'm in San Antonio today. In my other life, I'm an artist, and so I'm a poet and a performer, and I've been very active in that space as well. So that's me in the nugget.
Awesome. Come after you, Celeste.
Awesome, Yanira.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. So, hello everyone, and thank you. My name is Yanira Amadeo, and I can just give you a brief introduction of who I am. I'm a first generation college graduate, a board member of Somos El Poder National Latina Fundraising Institute, and also a PhD candidate at Montclair State University's Family Science and Human Development doctoral program. My research really centers on philanthropy and its influences on generational wealth and diverse families. Similar to Celeste, I have over 22 years experience in philanthropic and development work at higher education institutions. Currently, I serve as Executive Director of Development at the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at University of Connecticut. And really my role is to grow the culture of philanthropy for research, scholarships, and overall college and university priorities. So with that, I would like to introduce this segment of conversations. And really thank you for joining us for this virtual Q&A where Celeste and I, who as from our introductions, are experienced leaders in higher education fundraising. We'll dive into unique challenges and opportunities facing Latina-focused nonprofits. This information presented today, it really applies to all groups looking to learn more as we share practical fundraising strategies, career development insights, and ways to leverage cultural values to strengthen donor relationships. So very inclusive, open to all, applies to all, anyone who really just wants to learn more on how to fundraise. This session is also designed to provide real-world actionable advice to help you enhance your fundraising efforts and grow your impact in the nonprofit sector. So we want to hear from you. Drop your questions in the chat, and we'll select up to 2 to answer at the end. And so I'll begin the conversation with this question for Celeste.
Yes, go for it.
Celeste, what are the... Oh, actually, Celeste, did you want to start? Or did you want to?
I was going to say we're both excited. So I'd like to ask you the first question,
Okay,
Yanira.
go ahead.
And I'm interested from your perspective and your years of experience, and you can answer this through the lens of the work that you've done in higher ed, but I also think it's good to answer through the lens of your work, as a doctoral candidate, right?
Mhm.
What do you see as the main challenges and opportunities for Latinx focused nonprofits in today's fundraising environment?
So there are many challenges,
Yeah.
and equally, I feel as if the higher education landscape offers opportunities for grassroots organizations to learn from um, higher ed institutions. Many people don't realize, but higher ed institutions are some of the largest nonprofits in the nation. So, really learning their well-oiled machines, learning from them is really key to and scaling down for that grassroots application. So I probably would identify three. One is really like structural funding disparities versus strategic institutional partnerships, right? So, right now, despite Latinos making up to 20% of the US population, only 2% of foundation funding reaches Latinx serving institutions, right? So this really forces many nonprofits to focus on survival rather than mission-driven growth. So, universities have been really great at research practice partnerships and creating endowment funded initiatives. And that really supports the mission of the university. And so uh, that's one challenge and opportunity that grassroots organizations can take. Another another challenge and opportunity I could identify is really the professional development barriers, versus culturally responsive training models, right? I know Armando speaks to this often, but Latina nonprofits, about 88% of operate on budgets under $500,000. So really that's making costly fundraising conferences out of reach for folks. So that really limits access to critical knowledge and networking and being able to learn in a way that's going to help your nonprofit grow. So, you know, universities are position themselves to they do a lot of training internally. They partner with community groups, organizations, to help subsidize training programs. They also develop credential pathways. And I know I believe Arizona State has a nonprofit leadership alliance that their model is actually a good model where they've adapted Latina focused fundraising certifications, and helps, those Latina grassroots organizations. So kudos to Arizona State. So out of those two, I would say, the grassroots organizations can really learn from that. But then how would a small grassroots nonprofit achieve big impact with a small budget, and how can they make that scalable, right? And one way is to really maximize their community assets, and that's really what's going to help them to help them with their resource constraints. So something that I've researched and I think that it's applicable here is, building micro partnerships, ecosystems. You know, um, a lot of universities, like I said, they create a lot of partnerships and collaborations external to the university, and so that research practice partnership with a Latina organization, it could be helpful. So how would a nonprofit adapt to that? Do a neighborhood consortia, form giving circles of 5 to 10 local businesses to pool resources. Um, and I believe UC Berkeley has something similar with their Latina Community Fund. um, and try to do this on a smaller scale for your nonprofit. This is what I mean by using your community uh, also barter your skills in your network. Instead of paying for everything in cash, nonprofits can exchange services with small businesses, like offering cultural competency training in return for a free event space or printing. So, there are things that are going on like that across the nation to really help small nonprofit organizations thrive.
Thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think in particular, I love the idea of us really maximizing those community assets. And I like the term that you use of like these micro partnerships, because what I think that resonates with me in the work that I'm thinking when I started off my career at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, small, I mean, it was a large nonprofit back then. It was the
Mhm.
largest Latino arts organization in the country at the time. It was back in the 90s, but
Right.
we did not have a lot of resources for professional development. Like all of that, every penny that we had was pouring into the artist and the presentations, the exhibits, the musical festivals, et cetera, right? And I think when I think of what you shared here, and I think, oh, well, back then, we did have partners, but we weren't thinking in that way, like, oh, well, I could, if I knew that this other organization that I'm a partner with was going to that conference, maybe after the conference, I'd be like, hey, can we get together and have coffee? And can you kind of
Exactly.
show me the materials and let me just like
Hmm.
go over things, In other words, like if thinking of ourselves as part of a larger body of people, like they're part of my network, they're part of my tribe, I'm going to go and, when they've gone something, I'm going to try to loop back with them and get some of that education. And when I've had an opportunity to get something, I'm also going to share that with them. I love that concept because I think
Yes.
that actually aligns very well with some of our values that I think are most prevalent in Latinidad. And in our research, I know that we've come across this about community. Like many of us do feel a real strong sense of community. And that's how, when you look at the history of some of our philanthropy, not just in the US, but in Latin America as well, those mutualistas, right? The mutual aid societies, these giving groups, like that's a part of our history. And so I just feel like what you're suggesting here in those micro partnerships in particular is something that's very present, like it's something that's very now, but it's
Yes.
also, it relates back and connects back to historically how many of our communities have come together to tackle, problems. So thank you. That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Celeste. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and you know, uh, I feel as if, you know, learning is a process, right? There's
Yeah.
going to be trial and error. Persistence is key in these situations. And so, if something doesn't work out and you try it, you evaluate, doesn't work out, it doesn't hurt to try something new, try something else. And, for small grassroots nonprofits, I know that it's a scary situation to take those risks. Um,
Yes.
but, what are the alternatives? If you do not take the risk to go out, learn different ways of communicating, of building partnerships with those that you probably didn't think to build a partnership with, you could be missing out on opportunities.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
So thank you for that, Celeste. And so I have a question for you.
Yes.
Um, Give me one second. Where's my question? Oh, here it goes. So Celeste, can you share how we can tap into the the Latin communities giving potential more effectively?
I feel like this question, it's a good one, and they're all good questions. This one is one where I feel like, we could probably do a whole 9-month course on it, like because it depends on if we're thinking of like
Absolutely.
broad, right? Like broad appeals,
Mhm.
like in our area in higher education, we call it annual giving. In the nonprofit world, it was sort of like the annual fund, right? There's the work
Yes.
that's done in that space. And then
Mhm.
there's work that's done in a major gift or principal gift space, and major gifts, really how an organization defines that is determined upon the organization, right? Like when I worked at UT Austin, a major gift was they sometimes would call it like 100,000 or more, but at the institution that I'm at right now, smaller institution, smaller pool of people, it's $25,000 or more, right? So I'll say that like it depends on the major gifts work. You could talk about giving potential, and then you can talk really about working your board and the giving potential. And then we could also answer that question from more broadly, like what are patterns that we see in the research that we've done um, amongst our, of our Latino community of their giving potential, right? And
Right.
then I always, the way my brain works, I'm like, oh, what's the difference between giving potential and giving actual? So just
Hmm.
to say there's many ways we could answer the question. How I
Yeah.
am going to choose to answer it today, like for the purpose of this conversation and just seeing like who's in the room as I was looking at some of the organizations for which many of y'all are representing. I think I want to look at it kind of in the guise of the annual fund, and then I want to think of the board, right? Because I think the annual fund, which is our broad, and then the board, which is a very concentrated way of giving. So in the annual fund, I think what's helpful for people to think about when they're, really wanting to get their Latino community involved. And, it's not that that's the only community that we want to give to our organization. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
we want to attract people that care about our mission, that are with us in our vision, that are
Mhm.
passionate about the work that we do, right? And that
Right.
are willing to come forward to engage with us, whether it's volunteering or giving, right?
Mhm.
I would say that one good way to start is getting a bit of information, which you can get from the census, about your community. Like if you're thinking of fundraising specifically in your hometown, then I suggest learn what are the demographics, what's the median income, what are the zip codes that have like the highest median income, the lowest median income. It's really great to understand if you're like, for example, in San Antonio, if I'm doing that research, I can go to the census and then there's like some other spots where I could learn just a little bit about that, right? And that's going to help me understand, okay, of all of the people that, in this city that I might go to, what's kind of an average gift that I could think that people might be able to do. If the average income in San Antonio is 45,000, and I'm going to be sending out an appeal maybe to 500 people that I have on my list. And of those 500 people on my list, maybe some of them live in this zip code and another zip code
Mhm.
and that zip code. I can kind of get a roundabout idea as to on my little annual giving sheet, whether I'm mailing it or emailing it, the first level that I'm going to maybe ask people to give, right? So if I know that I'm just going to spit a number out there, like if I know that the average income among those 5 zip codes for which my list is based, right? My list is based,
Right.
and that's like $40,000. And so I'm looking and I'm thinking, well, $40,000 in this town for groceries and everything, for that segment of my population, it may not go too far. So I don't want to start off with asking people on that giving form to give a gift of $500. Like that's probably
Mhm.
not going to be where I want to go, right? I'm going to maybe start with a $5, $10 amount, right?
Right.
So how does that relate to the giving potential? So how it relates is I need to, on my messaging for an annual fund, I need to make it accessible. I need to like have people realize you can help no matter what it is that you're going to give. If it's $5, if it's $3, if it's $2, right? Um, the access point for people is actually like anything else. It's one of the most important parts of our work as fundraisers, but it's also really one of the best things to think about of the giving potential of your community, right? So
Mhm.
knowing just that very general information, it may not be specific information. And a about your community, right? The demographics, the income. At a higher education institution, we have the resources internally many times to kind of do that data sweep and get it in an algorithm and they spit it out, right? But if you're a small nonprofit, I really suggest looking at that yourselves more generally and spending some time doing that once a year, or once every 3 years if you're calibrating your programming, just depending on how you're evaluating your fundraising program annually or every 2 to 3 years, right? So that's
Mhm.
one way to do it with your annual giving. So that's about access, and then really like having messaging that we feel tells our mission, tells our story. So what does that mean for the Latinx giving potential? How does that connect with our messaging? So how that is like again look at that segment of 100 names, 500 names, and maybe just 50 names, right? And just trying to think
Mhm.
what is the messaging that's going to connect most with these individuals? Am I going to be telling a story in my polls? Am I going to be telling a story in my communications? Am I going to be highlighting a specific individual that I want to share? Like, this is the impact that giving a gift could have. So I'm thinking just very directly, if we're a K through 12 education nonprofit, and I really want to, I have one student that I'm like, wow, that story of that student's progress because of the result of our programming is magnificent. And I can actually tell that story in 4 sentences. Like, it doesn't need a lot of context. So that is something that actually evidence has shown that Latinos in particular want to know about the impact of their giving, like all donors. But when we're looking at a story that we think is going to relate to our Latinx population, it could be a story that we feel like, if it's a Latina, if it's a Latino, if that person may have some common characteristics that we know that our community has, so again, messaging and storytelling, and then some research to be able to figure out the right initial giving point, right? So those are 2 ways with the branding, and I'm talking kind of general. I could talk more about that, but we'll table that for another time. With our board, I think the giving potential with the board is, those conversations are on an individual basis. And I would hope that one would have some initial research on each of their board members, like what are they giving to? What other boards do they serve on? What is the company that they have, or where do they work? Are they active in a religion, organization? And then, if they don't know that, when you're meeting with them, you would ask these types of questions. And really, the way to unlock that giving potential with that individual is discovering what are the passions that this person cares so much about that they're willing to invest in philanthropically, either over a short period of time, in other words, making a single gift for a year, or over a long period of time, like a multi-year pledge, right? And that work is if anybody in the webinar would like, there was a great resource that I came across that another colleague put together, which is it's like 125 questions that you can ask an individual donor. And you really do get information about what they're interested in, also what their giving capacity is. And so that would be the 2 ways, right? But just for right now, I want to talk about the very broad, that's more like broad research based, looking at the census, what's the entry point, and messaging for those annual fund. And then very specifically, if you're thinking of your board, knowing that individual and going through like a series of questions. And, it's not like you're going to meet with them for an hour and be like, okay, I'm going to be asking you 50 questions today, but, building that relationship over time with your board members on an individual basis, so that some of those conversations, it might take 3 to 5 years for them to make a large gift. But some of them, after a few months, they may come in and want to do something at a couple of $1,000s, or they may be able to connect you with others that are going to be able to do that type of giving. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for the question. I get real passionate about talking about that because they're like,
I love it.
So many ways.
Listen, we need passion. That's what this is all about. I love it. I love it. And, I agree with you. Everything you're saying is, it adds to, and it relates with what I was sharing about scaling for, for grassroots organizations based on how the larger higher ed institutions do it, right? And, it really shouldn't be about size, but it's really about deepening those relationships, leveraging the community strengths, reimagining impact through collaboration. Those are the things that we're talking about here that we want as clear takeaways for our nonprofits that we're trying to support. Thank you for that, Celeste. That's awesome.
So Yanira, I know we had thought about doing a poll, and I know we're about 30 minutes in.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? Do you want to do a
Let's
poll?
do it.
Okay, you go ahead. You frame it for us.
Fabulous. Okay, so we have a quick fundraising challenge that we would like you to participate in. And it is, what is the biggest fundraising challenge your organization faces? And, we're curious to know that. Feel free to share with us through the poll. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Let's see. I'm doing
it's probably, for some of us, it's probably a lot of them. There may be somewhere like it's a lot. I could tap on all of those.
Nice.
While we're finishing up the poll here, and we'll let Anna end that poll for us, but I have another question for you, Yanira. I'd love to know, what are your thoughts about leadership training programs that you think would be that you would recommend for some of our Latinx nonprofit leaders that are joining us today on the webinar?
I didn't get to do my poll, but I'm going to do it after this question.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
So that's a great question. So I would say that, they're very important, and that we really need programs that don't just build skills, but also center our culture, values, and lived experiences.
Yes, agreed.
And thankfully, there are leadership training programs designed specifically for Latin nonprofit leaders, and it really offers tools, mentorships, and community support necessary to drive meaningful change. And one of those programs I would like to give a quick shout out is Somos
Almost.
Poderes,
Right.
La Vanguardia Academy.
Yes, agreed.
As an alumna, I really enjoyed the grassroots knowledge that I gained from this program. And, it was very special to me as a frontline fundraiser because I was able to understand the Latinx community in ways through the eyes of other grassroots struggling frontline fundraisers. And I'm like, oh, wow. And it really gets your creative juices going. So, it's a project-based learning program, and it's perfect for Latinx college students, for those early to mid-career professionals who are interested in nonprofit fundraising. But I will assure you that even when I joined the program and I took the courses, I felt tremendous value in taking the courses and being part of the cultural conversations. And it actually made me think about other cultures, about other ways to diversify fundraising efforts within my own university positions. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate you.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's one, but there's many others. And so I will give equal kudos to others that are doing some really great work. And I feel that strongly, very strongly, that, Latina representation in nonprofit leadership, it really matters. And, a lot of these programs really help to build sustainable pipeline for fundraising professionals and leadership. Somos being one of them, they have the La Vanguardia Academy, they do online classes, and they have the Juntos community and also one-to-one fundraising consulting. But let's move on to the NALAC Leadership Institute that I've recently learned, known as NLI. They have a week-long fellowship for nonprofit arts administrators. And Celeste, you may be familiar with them.
Yeah, the National Association of Latino Art and Culture. Yes, they're great.
Beautiful. So this program, they really provide training and strategic planning, budgeting, marketing, advocacy, and it's all through the lens of the Latinx culture and arts. And I thought that was beautiful, and that this is an institution that a lot of arts nonprofits really could acquire strong leadership to preserve and elevate their stories and how they can continue that arts culture in communities. And then I have, do you have a personal relationship with them, Celeste? Let me ask you real quickly.
Yes. And when they first this is a funny story. So it was initiated by Pedro Rodriguez, que en paz descanse. And he and I worked together. He was the executive director at the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, where I started my career. And so I actually helped write some of the initial grants that started the association back in the 90s. And it literally started at his desk there at the Guadalupe, and then it moved to a side office in the space. And then I worked with him to get some funding for it. But it's grown, that association, over, since the 90s. And they do have a few different types of modalities for leadership training. As you were mentioning, there's like the week long. They also have some other ones that I think are que duran más tiempo, you know.
Yes.
So it's a great organization, and they do advocacy work as well, like on a state and federal level, to make sure
I
that
saw
more
that.
funding is secured for Latino arts organizations, cultural arts and cultural. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes, I love it. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that inside knowledge of them.
Yes.
So if you
The
are an
benefit of
arts
being
non,
old, right? Like,
never, never. Um, so if you're an arts organization, I highly encourage you to look them up, see how they are, see how they could be helpful to you. And then I've also learned about the Latina Leadership Initiative, which is a 5-month program that empowers Latina leaders through mentorship, community service projects, and leadership workshops. And I thought that if you go to their website, great information. They really care about equipping Latinas with tools to create local and national impact. When reinforcing the importance of social responsibility. So I thought that their page was great, something to look into. Again, we have Aspiring Latino Leaders Fellowship through Latinos for Education. They have a mid to senior level education for professionals. This fellowship provides, mentorship and strategic development for Latina leaders for influencing policy and improving educational outcomes. And I thought that was good, because there may be some grassroots nonprofits who are interested in how to break into that policy sphere. And so, networking with some folks at this fellowship might help you get there. And then, I don't know if have you heard of ACE, Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility? They have a great leadership pipeline program, and their curriculum really covers business mastery, professional EQ, wealth creation, community engagement for very ambitious Latina leaders. It's really centered around a lot of like corporate social responsibility, and they try to help Latina professionals navigate systemic challenges and advance in their leadership roles. So especially in the corporate space, I thought that program was interesting as well. And then you have ACES Leadership Academy. That's the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancements Leadership Academy, and a wonderful academy to look into. And there's so many others, and I was so happy to learn that because, as far as I'm concerned, we can all learn from each other. Everyone's knowledge capacity is limitless. So let's try to learn as much as we possibly can to get our programs off the ground, to share best practices in the Latina community, and begin developing trends for how to move from that grassroots organization to the medium-sized organization, to the larger size organization. And let's show that progressive growth over time, not just in certain pockets of the nation, but throughout the nation. So highly recommend that happens.
I love all those options. I mean, some that you've described there are, I always, when I'm thinking of this topic of, the leadership development, like there's these opportunities, like you were mentioning, that are broad, like a conference that you can go to where, it's kind of like a road show, you're meeting a lot of people. And then there's other opportunities that are more hands-on experience, a very concentrated, a couple of days where you're working with a small cohort. And then you mentioned it, like I was telling somebody, I was like, there's networking, which is building the net. And then there's like tribe building, which is building your tribe, right? And
I
I
love
think
that.
at the ones that are cohort, not saying that won't happen at a conference per se, but those that are cohort based, there's a real opportunity, to create long lasting relationships with peers. And again, that exchange of information, I think of where have I learned the most, like cogent, like important, like esto me vale más que nada, information. And that's actually been through my peer relationships, like with you and with others, like, oh, wow, that's what you've experienced, or that's what you're dealing with. And over time, I can
Yes.
definitely pick up something on a webinar or a conference. But the deep relationships that you build with peers, that's I think that's one of the best leadership trainings and mentorship, right? Because you do get
Yes.
mentored and mentoring others too. Yeah. Thank you. I love that. These were great. I wrote
Thank
down
you.
quite a few.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just share with you later.
Yes, I was going to say, Anita, we may, and people on the
Oh,
webinar today, if they, again, if you want some more of this information written, connect with Anna and, Yanira and I can send some of that to y'all.
absolutely. Happy to do that. Uh, and so do we let me ask
The
you more question
results.
and then we'll go to the poll results or
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we could look at the results right now. Well, some of them have to do with what I was going to say in my in
can
the
you see the
next.
results?
Yeah, I'm seeing, and let me see. I
Oh,
put
okay, I see
share
them. Okay.
results. Oh, there we go. I
Mm,
think, can you see? It looks like board, lack of support from board, lack of diversity funding
mm,
are big,
mhm,
and dependency on too many federal grants. Yeah,
mhm,
so at least half though. Yeah.
mm.
Yeah, that
Well,
board piece is so important.
I'm pleasantly surprised to see that there's strategic planning going on in a lot of these groups because that's one of the lowest. That's great. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The personnel issue. Okay. So what are your thoughts on this, Celeste?
I think that there's certain skills that we want to think about, when we're wanting to build our sort of professional development toolbox, right? As
Mhm.
fundraisers. And maybe we're not like some of you, if you're the executive director or you're not the development person, but you have a role in it, or you want to
Right.
get your board involved. Like I think that there's some things that I wrote down as like, hey, these might be some things to think about. And some of it's going to echo what we've already said, but they're important points. Because there's also sometimes I'll tell people like it's not that deep, like like some of it's not that complicated.
Right.
It's
Right.
really simple. And one of the big one I think is important is again it's building your toolbox, building your tribe, and so thinking of it in those two ways, right? So you were talking about what you were just sharing, it's a little bit of both, right? Like the
Mm.
toolbox of what you're going to get in the conference or the training, and then the
Yep.
tribe, which is the connections you're going to get after that,
Right.
right? So then
Absolutely.
if we're thinking about the toolbox outside of these training venues that might be episodic, what are some things that I encourage people to do on a continual basis? So this might be like a practice, like for me, one of my practices, I meditate every day. And that is one of the things that, like Armando was teasing me earlier, and I don't know if it was on the record, like, you're kind of intense, right? So yes, I'm kind of intense. So what kind of keeps me from like, falling out of my body basically, or
Mhm.
jumping out of my body is just a nice grounding meditation practice. And so why do I do that? I do that because I want to be in my role. I need to be a good listener and I need to be able to make sound decisions many times in a short period of time, right? So, what is a practice that I encourage anybody who's going to be a frontline fundraiser to do? And I also think it's important for people if you're working in the advancement services, like if you're doing even the backstage work, or you're a researcher, knowing as much as you can about what happens in the ask, like when you're asking somebody for money and what leads up to that. So, one of the
Right.
most important things is listening skills and building your
Mhm.
listening skills. So,
Mhm.
you can do that in a myriad of ways. And all of your relationships will benefit from good listening skills, right? Not just
Absolutely.
your relationships at work or your relationships as a fundraiser. And
Right.
so there's a few books that you could look at, and I encourage you, like, set a time for yourself. Like, it may be difficult to do this during the week, but on a Saturday morning, if or a Saturday afternoon, whenever you have like even a block of 30 minutes, because really it's just 30 minutes. Take 30 minutes.
Mhm.
You can go on LinkedIn or you can go on Amazon, the book thing, or you can do an independent bookseller. I choose independent booksellers, when I can.
Yes.
And just look up listening skills, books on listening, right? And I would if you have a good library card, I always encourage people to get their library card, and you can go to the library and you just take
Mhm.
out one of those books and you get a framework that will resonate with you. And I think it's important for us when that's one of the key things, is the listening skills, because part of being a good fundraiser is listening to what somebody is saying, being able to connect it with the needs of your organization, and
Mhm.
then responding to what they're saying through the lens of what your organization needs. And I
Mhm.
really do believe that whether it's God, creator, the universe, whatever our guiding force is for us as individuals, if we are being put in a room with somebody, it's for a purpose. If we are being connected with somebody, it's for a purpose. And
Right.
so trust that and know that if you're going to go, sometimes people think, oh, I'm going to research, I'm not going to find what I need. No, you're going to find what you need. You're going to find the right book for you. And
Right.
it will, read that, put it into practice, put some of that framework into practice. Building your listening skills is important. The second one that I think is important is project management and or planning skills. Why is this important? Well, because there's only 24 hours in a day and there's only 365 days out of the year. And there's only 12 months in a year. And, besides being at work, you also want to be with yourself and be with your family and be with your
Mhm.
children, and your friends, right? And going to maybe an event once in a while, so the
Yes.
framework that you learn through project planning and or program planning is really going to help you discern, of all the information I'm getting and all these thoughts, what is going to actually be the most strategic return on my investment of time, right?
Yes.
And I could go deep into that. I'm not going to for the sake of time, but that is a real important skill. Like I cannot emphasize enough how important that skill is. And if it's one that for you where you're like, ay, a mí no me gusta planear, a mí no me gusta, eso no me atrae, it's just not my jam, then
Hmm.
you need to be partnering with somebody in your fundraising work that's their jam. If you're the
Yeah.
one that likes to go out there and do the shake shake, but you need to have somebody que está a tu lado that is thinking about the plan in your calendar. Because if you don't have that, honestly and truthfully, you're just going to be like, you will burn out because nothing will be strategic and you will not be having time to evaluate your program. So that's the second skill. Then the third skill that I would say, um, that would be helpful is about learning how to do the ask. And the best way to learn how to do it is to just do it, right?
Right.
For all of you that answered the lack of support from your board, I'm not
Hmm.
saying that this is the reason why they're not being supportive. I'm just saying, part of my thing is I like to challenge and I like to be like, okay, y por qué?
Right.
Why are they not?
Yes.
Are you being very direct and sitting and saying,
Hmm.
look, I've listened to you talk. I know that you're here for a reason. You're not just on this board, porque a ti te gusta estar en boards. And if you are, then, bye bye. But
Hmm.
you're here because this means something to you. Tell me more about that. And here's what we need from you. What of these two or three things could you do? Right? Like being very direct. And that's hard for people. Sometimes we're like, I don't know. Like my mom, when I first told her about the work I was doing, she's like, oh, estás pidiendo limosna. Well, no, I mean, yes, no, it's a little awkward, right? Oh, and then we don't want to talk about money because in our
Hmm.
culture,
Hmm.
ay, todo el mundo anda codo, we have to ask. And
Yes.
so you have to discern for yourself what that's going to look like for you, right? So the
Yep.
best way to do it is you go with a few people who are asking, and you can seriously ask a colleague, like, hey, can I maybe join you on a donor meeting with a board member or with a donor that you know is friendly and that won't mind somebody else there that maybe you just want me to connect with, right? And of course, you're not going to tell the donor, oh, I'm here to learn how to make an ask, right? You're going to say, oh, I'm here because my colleague, our organization aligns very much with the same thing that this organization does, or we've worked on this project and I'm just really interested in learning more about you, but you need to kind of just develop for yourself what that's going to be. So my style is not, how did I learn to do that? I used to be really afraid of doing that. And then what I learned is I would watch other people, some who would go about it like through the back door, like, oh, well, here are some of our problems. And I know you're a problem solver. And then they kind of wait for the person to say, yeah, I'd like to do this. One of the
Hmm.
best ones that I learned was Henry Cisneros. Um, I was in a room. We were working on a project on the west side of San Antonio here. And the archbishop had gathered some group of people together for an effort. It was through the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, which was interesting for many reasons if you look at the history of the Catholic Church and the Arts Center. But anyway, at the point, we at the right time we had the right board member, and he literally told me to lock 8 people in a room, which I did. I was the development person. I had to lock the door, and he just looked around and said to every single person, I'm putting up $25,000 for this project. So and so, you're going to put up five. so and so you're going to put up 10, so and so you're going to put up 15. Celeste, go around and get everybody to sign the form. And I was like, holy cow, right? So what did that mean? Somebody who had panache in the community, right? Somebody who, like, if somebody told you to do it, you were like, okay, I do it. I'll do it. But
Mm-hmm.
just being very direct. And I was like, well, I can't do that. But what I can do is I'm a good storyteller. I tend to have a funny way of delivering things and I can make people feel comfortable. And I'm a fairly good listener and I can actually relate what somebody has said and then connect it to what the mission of my organization is. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew those were three skills that I had. So those are the three things that I do in every single donor conversation, right? That's my style of doing the ask. So those would be
Yes.
just a few of those things that I think, like when we think of skills that we as
Mm-hmm.
Latinx professionals can practice and learn.
Oh my gosh. You hit it. You hit it. You hit it right there. I was like, first off, it is so hard. Sometimes it's hard for people to do active listening. This
Yes.
is just, it's just very hard because we're so used to just speaking
Oh,
and
and in our
feeling as
community too, right? We're like,
right. It's like, oh, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah, blah. And it's like,
yeah, yeah.
sometimes you say more when you say nothing. And it's, you have to, especially when you're having those donor conversations. So I'm with you on that. Those three principles you just shared, the skills that really Latinx nonprofit professionals to really focus on, spot on, because I use each of those things in my everyday as well. And, the importance of having that strategic support, whether it's from the board, whether it's from admin, whether it's from management and leadership, you need all of that in order to make you successful as a frontline fundraiser in this field. So I was loving everything you said, Celeste. Thank you so much for that response because I was just like, oh my God, this is exactly these are mine as well. I was like, she's reading is she reading my mind? What's going on here? But yes, thank you. I love
No,
it.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, I know we have a few minutes left, and we did say we would try to answer it, maybe like if we can, one question. So I don't know if anybody wants to put something in the chat, but
Yeah.
while we're waiting on that, I one of the things that one of the things I wanted to mention about the resources that you were talking about earlier is I wrote down this Women of Color in Fundraising, which is also another organization that is doing great work. And that particular Women of Color in Fundraising, they actually connect women of color fundraisers with women of color who are funding, like at foundations. And I've been enjoying that community because it is that connectivity with these women who are working at foundations as program officers. And it's a very generous space where people do say like, oh, I'm not going to go to you X foundation for funding, but I'm going to this other foundation. Can you give me some like pointers on how I can improve my proposal? So I love that. Love that. Since we don't have any questions or comentarios or anything, I'll
Yes.
just kind of summarize. I think some finer points that we've talked about today that I think both of us mentioned, definitely about I was sharing like building your toolbox, building your tribe, right? And I loved
Mhm.
what you had to say about the micro partnerships. Like I'm
Yes.
taking that one of the big things away. I love that idea. I also, what I love about that, Yanira, is that it's really talking about being strategic, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so what I like about the micro, it's like be strategic about what you need and then find a partner, find a peer who's going to help you with that, right? So
Yes.
that big theme of like your toolbox, build your toolbox. I talked about some of the skills that you want to have in your toolbox. Um,
Yep.
and then I think, you're talking about the leadership training opportunities. It was straddling that toolbox and your tribe,
Yep.
and you mentioned definitely networking and researching. I loved that, you brought in that, like, just research, go online and research what are some opportunities that are out there. One thing I wanted to add to that is like there actually are a lot of free webinars that these consulting entities that consult on fundraising that they do. And some of them are really great. I
Yes.
always say like one of the best thing is to just do, like you learn as you do, right?
Mhm.
But I love this about what you were talking about, many of these opportunities, some are paid that are not. I also
Mhm.
really liked what you were sharing about the other topic of is like in the tribe, it's like in your tribe, the people that are going to be helping you through is sharing those resources, right? And building your toolbox through the shared resources of the tribe. And then I sort of talked, about some specific ways for somebody to work on their annual fund, and bringing in that, like tapping into that giving potential of their community, as well as working with their board, some very specific things. Again, if you all would like a list of those 125 questions, you're not going to ask all 125 of them, but I think they're great. Let us know, and I'm happy to share that with you all. And then, I just closed out with just some skills that I think would be helpful for people to learn. And again, like for me, the biggest one is the listening and the learning to ask. But as you were saying, like that key thing of having the project manager or program manager, like that piece is important, because we need frameworks, just like the
Mhm.
body has a skeleton system. Like if it didn't,
Yes.
it would just be a pile of organs on the floor, like it'd be a
Yes.
pile of organs and nerves and veins on
Mhm.
the floor. You need a skeleton system to create the frame so you can walk through the work. So yeah, so that's a summary. And Yanira, did I miss anything? Was there anything you
No,
wanted to
you
add?
you you hit it on the head again. You're just on point today. I love this.
It's you. It's the exchange. We're on point,
Yes,
girl.
it's amazing. But I do want to encourage you all to be fearless. Go out, do your best work, mission driven. Always follow your heart, follow your passion, and do not be afraid to learn something new, to collaborate, to partner with folks that you probably wouldn't consider partnering with, and communicate and convey your thoughts and needs to your community, and you will see that the Latina community, we're not a monolith. So we're very diverse. We're very open to many thoughts and ideas. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much for having us. We hope that you really enjoyed this session from us. And if anything, you came away with one thought nugget that you can use in your everyday.
Yes, yes, that's great. And continue to look at the work that Somos El Poder is doing, and
Mhm.
the conferences, the cohort-based trainings that we have coming up. It's great. I learned about Somos El Poder through LinkedIn. It's just one of those Saturdays where I had about 30 to 40 minutes, and I decided to do some scanning, and I found it. And very grateful for this community, because there are not a it depends on where you're at, but in general, there's not a lot of Latinos that are working in this space. So when we're able to build community and, our tribe amongst one another, we create opportunities like this to share information with others and build up the work that we're doing, and, by extension, the work of our organization. So thank you all so much. Thank you,
Thank
Yanira,
you,
and
everyone.
thank you, Anna, for hosting us. Take care, everybody.
Gracias, Anna.